The sweltering late August heat shimmered off the cracked asphalt of downtown Birmingham, Alabama, creating visible waves that distorted the view of the historic buildings that lined the street. 13-year-old Marcus Washington sat cross-legged on a piece of flattened cardboard outside the old Greyhound station, positioning himself carefully in the small patch of shade cast by a weathered bus stop sign. His battered acoustic guitar rested across his thin legs, its body scarred with dings, scratches, and water stains that told stories of countless moves between foster homes, hurried departures when social services arrived unexpectedly, and the kind of careful but imperfect handling that comes from owning something precious that could be lost at any moment. The instrument was clearly damaged, missing 2 strings. The high E and B strings had snapped weeks ago during a particularly stressful move when his guitar case had been thrown roughly into the back of a social worker's car. The remaining 4 strings were old and beginning to show signs of wear, with the kind of dull tone that came from months of playing without proper maintenance or replacement. But Marcus had learned to make music anyway, adapting his playing style to work around the limitations of his damaged guitar with the kind of creative problem-solving that necessity had taught him. He'd been busking at this particular corner for nearly 4 hours, earning enough loose change from sympathetic passers-by to buy a gas station sandwich for dinner and maybe save a few dollars toward eventually purchasing replacement strings. The late afternoon crowd was thinning as people headed home from work, but Marcus continued playing with the dedication of someone for whom music represented far more than just entertainment or even income. It was survival, identity, and hope, all rolled into melodies that flowed despite impossible circumstances. If you're enjoying this story so far, I'd be incredibly grateful if you could show your support with a like. Your encouragement means the world to writers like me and helps stories like this reach more readers. When he began playing the opening riff to Iron Man, one of his favorite songs, and one that he'd practiced obsessively until he could perform it even with missing strings, something magical happened. Despite the guitar's obvious limitations and the urban noise of traffic, car horns, and general city sounds, his playing created a small pocket of musical beauty that seemed to stop time and draw attention from anyone within hearing distance. Marcus had taught himself to play entirely through YouTube videos at the public library, spending hours watching tutorials and performance videos whenever he could find time and access to computers. He'd memorized chord progressions, learned finger-picking patterns, and developed his own techniques for creating full-sounding arrangements on a damaged instrument. Music had become his escape from the uncertainty of foster care, the constant moving between homes where he never felt truly welcome or secure, and the profound loneliness that came from never staying anywhere long enough to form lasting friendships or feel genuinely settled and safe. His fingers moved with natural precision across the fretboard, creating melodies that shouldn't have been possible on such a damaged instrument, but somehow emerged anyway through sheer skill and determination. Passers-by occasionally stopped to listen, dropping coins into his worn baseball cap, while shaking their heads in amazement at the level of talent and passion evident in his performance. Some took photos or videos, clearly impressed by the contradiction between the poor condition of his equipment and the professional quality of his playing. What Marcus didn't know was that 50 yards away, stepping out of a black SUV that had just pulled up to the curb outside a downtown office building, was the very person who had co-written and originally performed the song he was playing with such dedication, skill, and emotional intensity. Ozzy Osbourne, in Birmingham, for a meeting with local music venue owners about his upcoming farewell tour, had heard the distinctive opening notes floating across the busy street and felt compelled to investigate their source. At 75, Ozzy had heard thousands of cover versions of his songs performed by everyone from world-class tribute bands to bedroom musicians posting amateur videos online. But there was something fundamentally different about this particular performance, a raw emotional honesty and technical skill that cut through the urban noise and traffic sounds to capture his attention in a way that few performances ever could, especially under such unlikely circumstances. As he approached the young musician, weaving through afternoon pedestrian traffic and crossing the busy street with the careful movements of someone who had learned to navigate public spaces without drawing unwanted attention, Ozzy could see that the boy was completely absorbed in his music. His eyes were closed in deep concentration, his entire body swaying slightly with the rhythm he was creating despite the guitar's obvious limitations, and the challenging environment of a city street corner. The missing strings should have made the song impossible to play properly. Yet somehow, this kid was not only making it work, but was actually creating something beautiful and moving. He was adapting the melody in real time, finding creative solutions that maintained the song's essential character and emotional impact, while accommodating his instrument's constraints with the kind of musical intelligence that couldn't be taught. It had to be innate. "That's some pretty impressive playing there, young man," Ozzy said when Marcus finished the song and opened his eyes, looking up to see a familiar figure standing before him, with genuine appreciation and curiosity written across his weathered features. Marcus's eyes widened in complete shock and disbelief, his mouth opening and closing several times before he could find his voice. He'd seen enough photos, videos, and documentaries to recognize Ozzy Osbourne immediately, but the idea that his musical hero would be standing on a Birmingham street corner, listening to his busking performance, seemed too surreal and impossible to be actually happening in real life. You're Ozzy Osbourne," Marcus stammered, his voice barely above a whisper and shaking with a combination of excitement, disbelief, and the kind of nervous energy that comes from meeting someone you've idolized for years. "I can't believe you're really here. I was just playing your song, and now you're actually standing right here in front of me. This has to be a dream." "I heard you playing from across the street," Ozzy replied with a warm, genuine smile that immediately put Marcus at ease and helped him realize that this surreal encounter was indeed actually happening. "And I have to say, you've got real talent. The kind that can't be taught or faked. That was my song you were playing, and you were doing it justice even with those missing strings. Where did you learn to play like that?" For the next 30 minutes, as downtown traffic moved past them, and other pedestrians occasionally stopped to watch the unusual street corner conversation between the famous musician and the young busker, Marcus shared his story with someone who actually seemed genuinely interested in hearing it. He talked about learning guitar from library computer sessions, spending hours watching instructional videos and trying to replicate techniques on his damaged instrument. He described moving between foster homes and carrying his guitar as his one constant companion through years of instability and uncertainty. He explained how music had become his way to process emotions and experiences that were often too complicated for a 13-year-old to understand fully, and how playing on street corners had become both a survival mechanism for earning small amounts of money and a form of therapy that helped him cope with loneliness and uncertainty about his future. "I've been trying to save up money to get new strings for months now," Marcus explained, his voice growing more confident as he realized that Ozzy was truly listening and seemed to understand what he was describing. "But every time I get close to having enough, something comes up. Bus fare to a new placement, or I have to eat, or there's some emergency that uses up whatever I've managed to save. So I just keep playing with what I have and trying to make it work." Ozzy listened with the kind of focused attention that came from his own understanding of what it meant to struggle, to have dreams that seemed impossibly far away, and to find salvation in music when everything else felt uncertain or hostile. The boy's resilience, dedication, and natural musical ability reminded him powerfully of his own early days, practicing in his cramped bedroom in Aston and dreaming of making music that would matter to people and maybe even change his life. "You know what?" Ozzy said, pulling out his phone with the decisive energy of someone who had just made an important decision. "I think we need to do something about those missing strings. And maybe a few other things too. You shouldn't have to choose between eating and having a properly functioning instrument." What happened next would be captured on security cameras from multiple angles and shared millions of times across social media platforms within hours. But the most important aspects of the encounter weren't visible to any camera. The genuine connection between two musicians, separated by decades of experience and vastly different circumstances, but united by their shared understanding of music's power to transform lives and create meaning from chaos. Ozzy made several phone calls while Marcus waited, watching in amazement as his musical hero arranged what seemed like impossible things, with casual phone conversations that demonstrated the kind of influence and resources that fame could provide when used thoughtfully. The first call went to a local music store, explaining the situation and asking them to stay open past their normal closing time for a special customer who needed immediate assistance. The second call went to his management team, requesting that they clear his evening schedule of business meetings and dinner appointments because something more important had come up. an opportunity to help a young musician who reminded him why he had fallen in love with music in the first place. The third call was to Sharon, briefly explaining what he had encountered and asking her to research foster care resources and music education programs in the Birmingham area, because he suspected that Marcus's needs went far beyond just guitar repairs and new strings. "Marcus," Ozzy said when he finished the calls and put his phone away, "would you like to come with me to get your guitar properly fixed up and maybe pick out a few other things you might need? I'd consider it an honor to help a musician who's working as hard as you are to make music despite difficult circumstances." The music store visit became an education in guitar maintenance, different string types, pickup systems, and the technical aspects of instrument care that Marcus had never had access to learning. The store owner, Jimmy Richardson, was himself a longtime musician who had played in local bands for decades and was genuinely honored to help when Ozzy explained the situation and Marcus's remarkable abilities despite his challenging circumstances. Jimmy spent over an hour explaining proper guitar setup techniques, tuning methods that would help maintain pitch stability, and maintenance practices that would help Marcus's instrument last longer and sound better regardless of the environmental challenges it would face in his uncertain living situation. But the real magic happened when Ozzy asked Marcus to play something on a brand new guitar that was similar to his own damaged instrument, but with proper strings, professional setup, and optimal sound quality. With access to a properly functioning instrument for the first time in months, Marcus's natural talent was even more evident, his playing demonstrating technical skill, emotional expression, and musical understanding that would have been impressive from a musician with years of formal training and stable access to quality instruments. "You've got something truly special," Ozzy told him as they left the music store with a properly repaired guitar, multiple sets of replacement strings, picks in various weights and materials, a professional tuner, and a sturdy case that would protect the instrument during future moves and uncertain living situations. But more than technical skill, you understand what music is really about: connecting with people, expressing things that can't be said with words, finding beauty and meaning even when circumstances aren't perfect. The story of their meeting, shared initially through social media posts from witnesses who had captured photos and videos of their street corner conversation, quickly attracted international attention and media coverage. But rather than focusing solely on the celebrity charity angle or treating it as a simple feel-good story, much of the coverage highlighted Marcus's remarkable musical ability and the broader systemic issues facing children in foster care who had talents and dreams but lacked stable support systems to develop them. Marcus music became a platform for serious discussions about youth homelessness, foster care challenges, the importance of arts education and mentorship programs for vulnerable young people, and the ways that society could better support children whose circumstances made it difficult to develop their natural abilities. Musicians from around the world shared the story, with many offering their own experiences of learning music despite difficult circumstances and describing the role that music had played in their own survival and eventual success. More importantly, for Marcus's immediate and long-term future, the encounter led to opportunities he had never imagined possible. Dr. Amanda Foster, a local music teacher who had seen the story on social media, immediately reached out to offer free lessons and mentorship. Several Birmingham area venues invited him to perform at open mic nights and community events, providing platforms for him to share his music with appreciative audiences. The owner of a nearby recording studio, moved by Marcus's story and impressed by videos of his playing, provided free studio time for him to record some of his original compositions, creating professional quality recordings that could be shared and potentially lead to additional opportunities. But perhaps most significantly, Ozzy's management team connected Marcus with the Richards family, foster parents who specifically sought to provide homes for children with artistic talents and interests. David and Maria Richards, both professional musicians themselves who taught at the local university, had the resources, understanding, and long-term commitment necessary to provide Marcus with the stability he needed while actively supporting his musical development and educational goals. 6 months later, Marcus was thriving in ways that exceeded everyone's most optimistic expectations. His playing had improved dramatically with regular lessons, daily practice time in a stable environment, and access to quality instruments and equipment. But more importantly, he had developed the confidence and emotional security that came from having adults who believed in his potential and were genuinely committed to helping him achieve his goals. Meeting Ozzy changed my life in ways I'm still discovering, Marcus reflected in an interview for a local television station that was doing a follow-up story about his progress. But it wasn't just because he helped me get a better guitar or connected me with people who could teach me. He showed me that music is something that connects people across all kinds of differences: age, background, circumstances, experience, and that if you have something genuine to say through music, people will listen and respond. A year after their street corner meeting, Marcus performed as the opening act for a major concert in Birmingham, playing both cover songs and his own original compositions for an audience of thousands of people who gave him standing ovations and enthusiastic support. Ozzy, who was headlining the show as part of his farewell tour, watched from the side of the stage with obvious pride and satisfaction as his young protege commanded the audience's attention with skill, confidence, and stage presence that seemed impossible to believe had developed in such a relatively short time. Marcus taught me something important that I had maybe forgotten after decades in the music business, Ozzy said during his own set that night, addressing the audience directly. He reminded me that music doesn't require perfect conditions or expensive equipment to be meaningful and powerful. It requires passion, dedication, authentic emotion, and the courage to keep playing even when the strings are broken and the circumstances aren't ideal. The encounter had created a mentorship relationship that continued to benefit both participants in unexpected ways. Marcus gained access to musical education, industry connections, performance opportunities, and most importantly, the stability and emotional support necessary to develop his talents and plan for a future that included college and career possibilities he had never dared to imagine. Ozzy rediscovered the joy of nurturing young talent and the deep satisfaction that came from using his platform, resources, and influence to create meaningful opportunities for someone who might otherwise never have access to them. The relationship reminded him of why he had become a musician in the first place and gave new purpose to his final years of performing. 3 years later, Marcus had been accepted into a prestigious music program at Berklee College of Music, with comprehensive scholarship support that covered not only his education, but also provided funding for him to continue performing and recording his original music. His story had inspired similar mentorship programs in other cities, connecting young musicians facing difficult circumstances with established artists who could provide guidance, support, and opportunities. The Marcus Washington Foundation, established jointly by Ozzy and the Richards family, provided instruments, lessons, and mentorship opportunities for other foster children with musical interests, ensuring that Marcus's experience would be replicated for other young people who needed similar support and opportunities. The most important thing that happened that day on the street corner, Marcus said during his high school graduation speech, which was attended by Ozzy and Sharon along with his foster family and extended network of supporters, wasn't that I met a famous musician or got help with my guitar, though obviously those things were life-changing. It was that someone saw potential in me when I couldn't see it in myself, and they cared enough to do something significant about it. The story became part of music education curriculum in schools across the country, cited as an example of how talent could emerge from unexpected places and how established artists had both the opportunity and responsibility to change lives through mentorship and sustained support. It demonstrated that the most meaningful forms of celebrity philanthropy often involved personal relationships and long-term commitment, rather than just financial contributions or one-time publicity events. But for both Ozzy and Marcus, the most important outcome was the genuine friendship and mutual respect that had developed from their chance encounter. It proved that music could create connections that transcended age, background, experience, and circumstances, and that sometimes the most significant moments in life happened when people were brave enough to share their talents, despite imperfect conditions, and generous enough to recognize and nurture potential wherever they encountered it. History was made that day, Ozzy reflected years later during an interview about his most meaningful experiences in the music industry. Not because a famous musician happened to meet a talented kid on the street, but because music proved once again that it can find a way to connect people who need each other, even when they don't know it yet. Marcus was making beautiful music with broken strings, and that taught me that the most important things in life often happen when we refuse to let limitations stop us from expressing what's in our hearts. The encounter had become legendary, not just for its immediate impact on Marcus's life, but for what it represented about the power of music to transcend circumstances, the responsibility that success carried to help others, and the way that authentic talent could emerge from the most unlikely situations when someone was brave enough to play despite broken strings and generous enough to listen despite having no reason to stop. Thank you for experiencing this inspiring story about the transformative power of music and the magic that happens when talent meets opportunity. If this tale of perseverance, unexpected mentorship, and the refusal to let broken strings stop beautiful music touched your heart, I'd be incredibly grateful if you could show your support with a like. Your engagement helps stories like this reach more readers and reminds us all that sometimes the most beautiful music comes from those who find ways to keep playing no matter what obstacles they face.